Good morning. This is Chuck Foley with Watchful Software. I'd like to welcome everybody to our session today. We're very fortunate to be joined by some very real visionaries in the realm of information security. And so for all the attendees, I hope that you have a very informative and engaging session. This is scheduled for 1 hour. I will ask that if you are an attendee, that if you have any audio devices, phones, iPads, your PC, etc., that you either mute or turn down the volume so that your calls don't get broadcast to the whole world. You also have the ability to to ask questions. Please feel free to do so. As the questions come in, we will hand them to the organizer, who will take them to the panelists to try and get you any insight to the best of their ability to help you with the challenges that are facing you today. This is the first webinar in a series that we'll be doing over the next year, which is our Global Thought Leadership series. It's a multi-tiered structure which is targeted to get good discussions and best practices and key thoughts and ideas spread among the cybersecurity community. It consists of a series of webinars which are held globally, as well as a series of executive breakfasts which are held in key cities around the world over the next year. Your participation here is greatly appreciated. This is sponsored by my company, Watchful Software. We are a player in the world of data-centric information protection and control. Basically, our job is to make sure that sensitive and confidential information stays that way, and that the systems that your people use to execute your company's or your organization's work stay restricted only to your people. Very leading edge technology. I welcome you to join our website and investigate more. But at this point in time, I'd like to move on and welcome and introduce our panel. First of all, we have Dr. Mansoor Hasib, who will be the moderator of our panel. He is joined by some industry experts, including John Johnson, Rock Lambros, Dr. Joanne Martin, and Richard Rushing. These people are at your disposal today. They've got a number of topics that will be cast among them and provide feedback, and then it will be up to you as the audience to be able to tap into this brain trust and tell them what you are looking for. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Mansoor and have him proceed with the first set of foundations and questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Chuck, and thanks to Watchful Software for hosting this event and for inviting me to be a part of this event. I'm very excited to hear from our distinguished panelists at a time when more than 1/3 of the U.S. population's data have been breached and are now possibly in multiple foreign hands. This includes some of the most sensitive data belonging to more than 21 million U.S. high-security federal workers, spies, undercover agents, their friends, and relatives, you name it. There is no industry safe from data leaks and breaches. In 2015, the healthcare industry alone has experienced breaches and leaks involving 99.3 million individuals' sensitive information. The retail industry is experiencing costs over $238 million, and this cost is growing. The federal government estimates that $1.2 billion per year is lost through email scams. A discussion of the future, of course, could go in an amazing number of directions, but let's focus on a couple of areas first. Let's discuss the role of government. So recently in the news, a federal appeals court in Philadelphia ruled that the Federal Trade Commission has the authority to sue corporations over poor cybersecurity practices. The courts have also ruled that banks and members of the public can sue for loss. Actual loss does not even have to be proved by the public. So I'd like to start by asking our panel, what does this mean for corporations? What are the positive, negative potential impacts for corporations? So let's make this very interactive. Any of you can jump in and let's all talk and share opinions and ideas about this.
Hey, this is Joanne, and I'd like to just start by saying that I think there's certainly a problem. Nobody can debate that, and there's help needed. I am concerned for businesses because as we go down this path, we lose sight of what I consider a fact, that if, as a business, your network is breached by a criminal, you're the victim. And so people are suing you for being a victim at some level. One of the things that's missing in the industry today, I believe, is a standard of care. How do we know if you've done enough? Probably if you're committing malpractice, you should be sued. But what is the limit that says you've done so much? We all know you can't be perfect. So where do you hold the line? And I think we've got to have a debate around that in order to, before we turn all of this loose and the courts start going crazy with the suits.
Great, that's a great opening, Joanne. Anyone else want to throw a different perspective on that?
Yeah, this is Rock. It's kind of a
this is John. Yeah, I think that it's a particular concern that we don't have a consistent way across our companies of dealing with sensitive data, with customer data. But at the same time, I feel that the hand of government can be a little bit too harsh and try to apply a one-size-fits-all solution, and that can end up, like Joanne said, treating a company that's a victim as well as in a punitive way. And so I think we need to agree on some things like, what does timely mean? There's a lot of ambiguous language, but at the same time, I have concerns that the government might over-define terminology in a way that hurts companies.
So an interesting point that I thought I heard Joanne bring out, which was great, is that on the one hand, the company is a victim. There's no question about that. But there is also, she raised this question about due diligence. In other words, where does due diligence begin or stop or considered to be adequate? So right now, I don't know of any body that tells us that we're being due diligent. So any thoughts on that?
I just want to magnify that again. That is what's needed. There's a group called the CISO Coalition that has sort of started to think about this and try to figure out if we can define something like a standard of care. So in medicine, you have a standard of care. Can we define that for our industry? Are we mature enough at this point to be able to do that? I don't think it exists. My sense is it's going to need private-public partnership to get it right. But I think it's an important ingredient for all of us to engage our thinking around and really see if there's a way that we can define this that would be fair, so that we could say, if you haven't done this standard of care, it is malpractice and you're suable. That would just be my view.
Okay, so at this point, they have not developed any standards. They're just looking for what, participation or what?
Looking for participation, looking for a lot of debate over, is it even possible or pragmatic, and what are the challenges around doing it. And I think it's a wide open area for research, for academicians to consider, and then for public-private partnerships to engage in, because this is such a huge issue for all of us.
So is there a website that you can share where people might go to join that?
CISO Coalition is on its own a closed group because it's a membership group, but the Avanta CISO events are the home of it, and so that would be a place to get started.
Okay.
The goal is to have the CISOs for the Fortune 500 companies participating as leaders, but we are starting to reach out to universities and others as we go forward.
Yeah, I'd like to put in a pitch for the Security Advisor Alliance. There's no cost to be a member of the Security Advisor Alliance. We don't provide the timely threat information on a daily basis, but we do have a couple hundred members from across the Fortune 2000 companies. And we're looking to do something very similar, which is put the power of the CISO behind these activities. So I see there being a lot of collaboration between groups in the future, although I still remain skeptical about private-public partnerships. I think that it's going to be a while before those really add a lot of value and become successful and broadly adopted. The government can be our friend and share information, but at the same time, there's a lot of concern in business about another branch of the government taking that information and using it against you. So there's a lot of skepticism, I think, in the business community, but I'm entirely behind the coalitions and activities where we can define best practices, standards and frameworks, and a model for going forward amongst ourselves, so that it kind of fits what we need rather than having the government tell us what to do.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else on that topic, or should we move to something else?
No, this is Rock. I think one of the biggest challenges that we are going to face with regards to defining what is, a standard practice or due diligence for our industry is that it's going to be different. The baseline is probably going to be different across verticals, right? I mean, healthcare is healthcare, right? But there'll be a different baseline required probably for retail, a different baseline required for critical infrastructure such as energy, right? A different, even within energy, being that I'm within oil and gas, there'll be a different baseline required for somebody like my company, where we're a midstream natural gas processor and a nuclear power plant, right? So
that is so valid, yes.
That's going to take a while to set out, and I think that's one of the dangers of trying to establish that standard practice or baseline due diligence. As like John mentioned, right, that the government's going to try to put in a one-size-fits-all type of mentality, and that's just not going to work. And then compound that with the trust issues that John just mentioned between the public and private sector. I think we have to take it upon ourselves as security professionals to kind of sort it out.
Great. So anyone else? We do have an audience question coming in. So I see an audience question which says, do you believe that the most recent executive order on cybersecurity in the U.S. will drive a standard of care for certain industries, publicly held companies perhaps? Any thoughts on that?
My belief is it's worth considering, but I don't think in terms of an actual standard of care. This type of executive order is doing the right thing for the public in terms of finding ways to protect the public. But I think it misses the point about companies being victims. And so it comes down on a compliance basis of what has to be done, what kind of reporting, what kind of issues have to be covered, and doesn't go after the guys who are really the bad guys. So it depends on your perspective. If you're in the public and trying to be protected, it may address something, but it doesn't address the industry perspective, I think.
Okay. Anyone else on that topic?
I mean, I guess this is Rod. Just let me throw in. I guess from a day-to-day management approach, I don't sit here in my job and think about, Obama issued an executive order, we better do this, right? I'm approaching my job from what's best for the company and what's best for our customers, right? And everything else, focusing on the data, data is king, and focusing on risk, right? And then my belief is that everything else will fall into place if you take that approach.
Once again, a very valid point, because we really don't want to do cybersecurity strategy based on some auditing standard, but we really want to do what is right and be able to defend that as cybersecurity professionals.
Right.
I think that's what you're saying, Rock, and I think that's a very valid point. So maybe we should move a little bit outside of the government now and maybe just talk about security technology. I mean, what recommendations do you have for people as they move? So is it security technology, policies? I mean, what good practices should people be doing? So maybe let's talk about that a little bit.
This is a pretty diverse environment when we're talking about sensitive information and data. We have PHI and PII and intellectual property and restricted M&A data and SEC filings, and there's a lot that we have to protect, and companies traditionally aren't at the level that the government has taken it with classification policies, and so I think that when it comes to data, we do need to take a data-centric approach, and we need to identify what is the most sensitive and important information that we want to protect. But when it comes to then the controls and the way that we protect it, I see companies all sort of reinventing the wheel and deciding how they're going to protect their data, and it's always slightly different than the next company. I would like to see more consistency. I'd like to see some cloud-based tools that help us to better manage our data as it goes out to reside in the cloud and as our customers use it. But I think that we're sharing our best practices. Like Rock said, I think that we're taking a risk-based approach to protecting the most important things, and that's great. But I think we're all doing it differently.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else on thoughts about best practices?
And I think doing it differently is okay to an extent, right? Because each company is different, right? Each company's needs are separate. Each company's risk appetite is different. But I also agree with John is that as an industry, as a security industry, how can we standardize on protecting the data as it leaves our borders, right? Because that's where the common battleground is, right? Out in the cloud. It's no longer just sitting, on your servers inside your data center where you can put in your own controls, decide how much you're going to invest in those controls, and keep it all nice and solid and enclaved, right? You could, put in the greatest contracts in the world with your cloud security or with your cloud providers, right, surrounding the security of your data, right? But ultimately, you still lose control over that security once your data goes to the cloud, right? And it becomes a trust issue. So, a little bit. I mean, it's inevitably going to have to be a little bit different across companies, just because of different risk appetites, different needs with different industries, but there's got to be some sort of standardization, some sort of commonality, as the common battlefield right now is the cloud.
Well, and I think that that's a good point. And what we're seeing though today is a lot of fragmentation. If I want to put data in Salesforce, or if I want to put it in Microsoft, or if I want to put it in Amazon, now all of a sudden I'm using different tools.
Oh, yeah.
Shifting our focus away from investing in the data center and on-prem tools, we need to have a more consistent layer of security at the cloud, where we have sort of a consolidated approach to identity and to securing the data. In some cases, in a role-based way. And if we need to hold the keys, having a single place to hold the keys instead of having to go out and hold the keys in different places for every SaaS vendor.
So given this move to the cloud, do you think that there's been a change in policies, procedures over the last 12 months, and do we need to even think of a new breed of best practices down the road? Maybe some suggestions along that would be helpful to us.
I assume we're talking here public cloud as we talk about that, and I think that one of the big changes is also an opportunity in terms of being able to protect from a cloud. And I think we need to look at some of the new capabilities that come up with on-the-fly provisioning of security within a cloud environment, and really make them hardened so that we take some of the old ideas of protection and move them into the cloud environment with the principle that says this sort of thing has to be protected this well, without saying exactly how it must be done, because that gives us flexibility from company to company. But really moving towards the flexible provisioning within the cloud, where the user maintains control of what gets provisioned, I think will become a trend as we move into more and more cloud environments.
Yeah, I think that we can agree on the various requirements that we have for different types of data in the cloud, as an industry, as as corporations. We have very similar needs. I agree the implementation may be different, but I think that spelling those needs out, sort of coming to a common understanding of, when do we, that there are times we need to be able to isolate the data, we need to have assurances that the applications are secure, around the cloud piece. I think there are a number of those requirements that we all probably could agree on are necessary, but we would probably choose to classify our data and protect it maybe differently from company to company.
Yeah, I think this is part of the cloud maturity model. Depending on how long businesses have been impacted in using the cloud, you see different levels of sophistication and everything else. And I think that needs to be addressed, namely by other common solutions, to be able to say, how is my data at rest taken care of? How is my data encrypted, et cetera, with that, which that comes with more and more people using the cloud and the maturity level increasing. The requirements that used to be kind of non-supported now are forcing the cloud providers to actually support some of the more standard-based security solutions.
I think that's right.
So, Richard, that's very interesting. So, the sophistication now required for the Chief Information Security Officer is one of the areas that you just pointed out, and we just got an audience question kind of related to that, which talks about the role of the CISO, which is changing in terms of reporting, maybe even a different type of person required. So apparently the Pricewaterhouse survey said that 28% of the CISOs now report to the board of directors. And do you have opinions on where CISOs should report, and do you believe that companies are going to face increasing liability from shareholders, customers, etc.? And any thoughts on that? That would be great. I think this could be a great discussion.
No, I think it's kind of the evolving standards of areas of where CISOs kind of report, or the information security rolls up into organizations. Historically, it kind of always part of in the same line with IT, but as there's other responsibility and as IT is holding kind of less control for some of the data. A lot of organizations, your e-commerce environment is actually running in and of itself differently than in an IT organization. Some of the other sales organizations run their own services. So the kind of disruption that has occurred in information technology, things done by the cloud, other sides, you have these pockets of controls that have started coming into place. There does need to be a common set of security standards, practices, and procedures kind of across the board of what happens to be done. There's also kind of one of the things that comes into play, though, when you join the board of directors table and everything else, or a senior leadership staff. When security is brought up to that level, the security is now embedded in the business, and you're ultimately responsible for the security. There's always been this avenue to say, hey, if someone wants to accept a risk of putting something in the cloud, the business can always accept the risk of doing that. And in this case, when you're at the executive level, you're accepting the risk of doing that. So there's a lot more ownership of risk. There's a lot more other things that the CISO at that level has to take on as part of the having the seat. It comes with the responsibility of saying, I need to secure the enterprise, not just these pockets of information. It's now across the enterprise. I think you're going to see it as a direction. I don't think it has some effect to other businesses and organizations. It's more of the power of the CISO that actually had. I've seen successful organizations very well run without necessarily having the CISO sit at the board level. It really depends on the individual, the program, and other things that are there, and how well the business commitment is to security, because that becomes the key factor. You're either going to have a board level commitment to security, which other board members may have had an issue, a breach of something, and that they want to be effective by it. But at the same time, if the business sees, understands, and wants to address security issues inside the business, it really doesn't matter where the executive actually sits. The business wants to make the security one of the priorities. It will be made one of the priorities regardless of the hierarchical structure of the organization.
I think this is another one that is a trend today, and that it's being puzzled around. I tie it to a maturity model also, and I think that our financial institutions are leading the way, as they have in many things. And in financial institutions, insurance and banking, and there's a strong history of having a risk environment, a risk management environment, a very rigid one with controls and measures and attention. I think that as security is viewed as a business issue that really is one of the top risks of the enterprise, it will align more clearly with that risk management environment than with IT. It will clearly need a partnership with IT, because many of the implementations of remediations of care will take place in the IT environment, but the decisions, the metrics, the approaches, I think, are going to need to be done more and more at the business level and within a risk environment.
Yeah, I agree. I've certainly seen a move towards a more consistent presentation of risk from the security team. And I agree that in some industries, in finance, insurance, they understand risk and they're leading. But when you look at companies like General Motors, you look at companies like Motorola, you see a lot more in the way of customer-facing security, product security, and that clearly falls outside of IT. So we have a broader role in protecting information, protecting our customer information, and I think that at some point it does need to be more of a risk function that reports in that way outside of IT. I don't think that a lot of companies have the maturity outside of those that we said we're leading. And I don't think that a lot of CISOs have the experience and the ability to communicate, to understand and explain risk to the board. And what I've seen is when you take someone who is a good technical security leader and you put them in front of the board and they do a bad job, all of a sudden that person is now reporting to a CISO who's from the business and is not a security person. And they're sort of pushed back down in the stack because they're not able to express themselves well. And so I think that it's crucial that, not only does, changing the org chart doesn't fix things. What we really need to do is, I think, develop CISOs that have that broad view, an understanding of risk, and the ability to listen and communicate well with the business. I see people developing and starting to have those skills and that capability, but I also see people who haven't made that transition, and their company then decides to move somebody from elsewhere in the business to be the de facto CISO.
But don't you think that may be just the way this is going to go as we mature, and that people who don't have those business skills won't make the cut, and they will stay at that technical level, and the person with business skills will marry to that and will have a very strong dependence on it. But the CISO, the technical CISO, will have to either develop the business chops or accept the transition in roles.
Well, and I think that we have a responsibility within our industry to help mentor and develop at the high level.
Absolutely, yeah.
To develop those tier 1 CISOs, just like we have a responsibility to, at the entry level, to get people into the pipeline, to train and mentor and give them a career path at the other end.
Yep, I agree completely with that.
Yeah, and I really think that it's going into a couple of different areas that's there. Is you're kind of out of your environment when you go to a board level, because it's not the same folks that you're normally used to dealing with. They have their own language, their own area, their own focus of what to actually do. And whether it's a presentation or an update or anything else, that has to be crafted specifically for what's there. And if you're only given this opportunity once a quarter or once a year, it's going to take quite a number of those before you understand exactly what people are looking for and the answers to kind of go over some of this definitively. And I think that's kind of the area. This is kind of a recent opportunity, so you really, it's not something that has been done in the past and everything else. It's fairly new, and I think that at that level has always been, for lack of a better term, a weak point of taking the technical and making it practical to businesses and organizations. And I think it's just a factor of you have to have experience to be able to do it. You have to understand what you're trying to communicate very concisely and simply to that board, and have them understand in business terms whether it's risk, cost, kind of an area for them to actually focus on versus the scary things that are on the internet. But I think given our current posture that we have the breaches every day of something happening, gives much more of a board awareness of saying, tell me more, tell me more. So I think we're kind of in, for lack of a better term, a very good spot moving forward, is we're not trying to sell the business on this will kind of happen to us if we don't form this. The board understands what's going to happen, and that's where they're concerned with. So we no longer have the sales side of it. We have what are we doing for or against the threats that are out there.
So from an organizational standpoint, I think that you may see the CISO in a way morphing into the CIRO, the Chief Information and Risk Officer. But I still think that there's a need within whether it's within on the product line side or whether it's within IT, to have operational security expertise. And one of the areas that I'm trying to develop is along the lines of OT, because we have a lot of experience as being IT security professionals, and now we're having to deal on the business side, on the manufacturing side, with OT, with industrial control systems and Internet of Things and so on. And so I think that there will remain lots of technical opportunities for security professionals. I think that at that high level, we definitely have our work cut out for us, because we want to do that right. We want to step up and deliver. For a company that is not on the leading edge, where your security organization is still, reporting up through the CIO, I think that when you have financial difficulties, when you have a down year and you have big budget cuts, that can really impact security. If security is just seen as a function of IT. And so one area to sort of overcome your organizational chart limitations is, I think, the importance of being able to carve out a security budget that isn't a part of the total cost of IT, so that you can have a little bit of immunity or insulation from the budget cutting that goes on.
So that is wonderful. That actually segues right into a audience question and a discussion area that probably would be helpful to us. One is that I've written about this topic, and even when I was practicing CIO, I never had a separate cybersecurity budget or a security budget. So let's talk about that budget. Should it be separate? I mean, how does that help? How do we carve out security budgets separately? And as we do this budgeting, and as the role of the CISO starts to become more prominent, does the budgets in general get increased? Do we get increased staff, increased budget? I mean, can you project the future along those areas, or share some of your experiences and thoughts and cautions to the public? I think that'd be great.
Yes, I think
one of the places where the standard of care issue will come in, because if somebody who wants to sue can make a case that the budget for security was always cut and was just a standard part of the IT budget, and was seen as an expense and not as a positive influence on managing risk, it'll become a really big target. And so I think having a separate budget, being able to tie it to risk and to how it's managing risk, is incredibly important.
Yeah, and I think the key there
And I think if you're going to be tying the risk, you need to be able to measure the risk and demonstrate that what you're doing is actually effective. I think that if we don't run security more like a business and show that, hey, we were spending money on this, we're measuring it, we're seeing that we're not being effective, we're shifting our resources to something that will have more of an effect. So that metrics approach, the having feedback, and I like to call it evidence-based security. That gives you credibility, I think, with management.
Yeah, and I think that shows that security can actually be an enabler to the business instead of just a cost center or a roadblock, right? The department that says no all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think, going back to our conversation about talking to the board, part of delivering that message that security can be an enabler of the business is partnering or trying to find mentors throughout your organization who do have experience talking to the board outside of IT. For instance, your chief legal counsel, the head of your audit department, something like that, to where you're kind of getting some visibility outside of IT, right? You're pulling in key partners who you're inevitably going to have to work with, and they already have the trust of the board, and then they say, hey, this guy knows what he's talking about surrounding information security. It's not just fear, uncertainty, and doubt that he's spreading, but can legitimately help us achieve our business goals. That gives you some street cred going in, right? And make that conversation with the board easier.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I think we have to start off. fiscally responsible and showing that we can manage security and our budget well. But then we need to go beyond that, and ultimately we need to have the business see that we're providing a real value. When there's new technology that comes along, the cloud, mobile, social media, big data, that we can step up and we have the maturity. We've built our capabilities so that when they want to enter a new market, when they want to develop some new application for customers, we're ready, and we can enable them to quickly move to market and differentiate themselves from the competition and add value. And I think that kind of a partnership is where we want to eventually land.
Right.
Yeah, no, I think from the budget standpoint, you've got a couple of key areas, and we touched upon those as far as a maturity level. And one of the things that goes along with the maturity level is you should be able to quantify new technology required, things that are needed and everything else with definable metrics so that you know when you stop a particular attack through something, you quantify that. It's like we spent X dollars, and I think this is one of the things that's always super hard for organizations, is to say we spent a bunch of money and you don't get credit for a job well done. We don't provide that kind of quantifiable data to a lot of people, so that when you stop something, there's not a number that's attached to that. So if you look at kind of a physical security in a retail kind of establishment, they have shrinkage or loss due to theft or anything else down to a science where they can tell you what item was stolen, what was going on with it, how much is there on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. We don't have that in security. We don't have basically the same capability, so we don't really kind of can disclose a lot of the ability that's there. So when they say we increased your budget, which it will increase, so my guess is in the next 5 years your cybersecurity budget will double, given what it is today. The issue comes back to it is, if I increased it $1 million, what did I get for my $1 million? And I think that's part of the issue, that a lot of businesses, that's a non-starter, because if I give you money, I need to see some kind of results that are there. And I think John pointed out this really well, was that you have to run it as a business, a P&L statement, as well as that function needs to be addressed, so that when you can now show that, hey, I need more money, and this is the result that's going to come from the more money. And I think that is a conversation that has never really occurred, that is now starting to occur as we see more and more people trying to understand how this is going to impact the business, but as well as impact the security posture of the organization.
So one of the things that I heard the panel mention was trying to get the cybersecurity function to add value to the organization. So instead of being a cost center. And I think it would be wonderful for each of the panelists to kind of give us some key silver bullets, some suggestions that would make the cybersecurity function sort of a positive function, an added value function, rather than a cost center. How do we do that? If each of you could take 3 to 5 minutes with the time that we have remaining, I think that would be very valuable to us all.
I'll start. I'll just jump in. I think that as we look at, again, changes in technology, changes in the models that we use for running an enterprise, one of the things that we can do as security professionals is get out ahead of them and show the opportunities that exist in them rather than just the dangers. BYOD is an example. So as mobility came in, to be able to say, have the security team get out and lead that transition in a secure way so that there doesn't need to be the fear of moving forward, I think is a huge step when that happens. With cloud, identifying the ways that cloud can be a business
valuable, yeah.
order right? With each of these transitions, if security professionals could get out ahead and really take those new technologies and turn them around as opportunities, I think will make a huge difference and impact on our view in how we're viewed by the business.
Wonderful. So yeah, cybersecurity needs to be innovative.
Yep.
Excellent. Anything else?
I think to counter that, I've seen examples where enterprise architecture has stepped in to innovate because they have to innovate, and just go out to adopt technologies because they're new or because, without a real business case behind it. And I think that security is always very good at understanding, if we're having those conversations, we understand where the business is going, and if we're positioned well as far as our capabilities, that, when they come with requirements, the business requirements, security needs to be involved. And that's where being under IT can sometimes be a roadblock. Because if the business comes to IT and says, we need to do this, the IT architect may not have visibility to all the different ways that we can develop a solution that will both be secure and deliver the enterprise functionality. And so security needs to be involved at the beginning of that process instead of at the end, because when it's at the end, you're always going to be seen as slowing down the project and bolting on security. You have to spend more money and encrypt it. I think we need to move to the front end of that discussion, and then I think that they can see that we really have something to add.
So this was another very valuable point then, that cybersecurity needs to be tied to the mission and be done at the very beginning rather than at the end. Completely wonderful point.
Yeah. No, I think it was critical to find your critical paths in your organization of that, to get security brought into whether it's applications, product, et cetera, as early as possible in those critical paths, so that it's either something that everything has to pass through, so you get less and less of the outliers in that structure. But I think one of the big things, and we touched on that earlier, was you run your security group as a business, and some of the bylines on that is a P&L statement. You got to know where your security and who's owning parts of security, because as you get into commoditization, the firewalls and things like that, is that yours? Is that the network ops folks? Who is paying? How is it being done? Because those are addressable controls, so that when things happen, you can understand, I have this, or I need to deploy new solutions. And it used to be part of our stack was push those away, but I think it comes back now that could be added into controls to have a part of the budget side of that. But just as well as a budget is part of that, and running it as a business, businesses have plans. And so you should have an 18-month plan of how and what technologies you're going to deploy, new or replace, what's the cost of deploying those technologies, and have this as a stretched out goal chart, so that if the businesses change a direction through economies or things, or a downturn or something like that, you can adjust your plan just as the rest of the business has to adjust the plan. You can adjust the plan and discuss with the people to say, we're going to have to move this out, or we're going to not do this, and here's the risks that are associated with not doing those controls off of that. And I think that is a huge level that says, if we're moving this direction, people understand if you have to pull something in or leave it out, or if it's not even on the roadmap, it becomes an ask then to go through it. But at least you have something that says, here's what my scale is going to be for this year, next year, instead of the once a year budget cycle that says, okay, what are you going to do in the next 12 months? And everybody throws everything in there. It's really got to be a structured plan. And with that plan, you can establish anchor points to the business units, to other things as well, so that you can now socialize that kind of environment. And like I said, you really have to take credit for the stuff that you prevent. We don't, and that's one of the key areas. There should be dollar figures with your prevention lever that says, hey, this is what's actually being prevented, whether it's individual metrics or an understanding that this is what the cost of that prevention is entailed into the organization with that. And I think until you start doing that, you're always going to be between that budget sandwich that's always going to be take, or cut, in and out of thing, because you don't have a association with, or if we cut, here's what the dangers that are going to be there. And it's not the kind of knee-jerk reaction to create that. It has to be already done and socialized with the people in the organization so they understand the cut that's actually there.
I think that's a great point, because we often don't do a very good job. We might come up with strategic plans, but we don't communicate them well. And if we don't communicate them well, then we think, why don't they know what we're doing? Well, we didn't tell them. Why don't they tell us what they're doing? They didn't tell us. And it becomes an us versus them. And we need to turn that around, and I think good communication is key.
Agreed.
Yeah, so that was a great thing. So what I got from that is that we need to have a vision, we need to have a plan, we need to monitor, and we need to communicate the value on a continuous basis.
Yes, because it's so important, because otherwise you're left with, okay, you're great when something bad happens, but why does something bad happen that you're graded on? It should be kind of it's not one test that makes a grade. It's a series of tests, quiz, activities, etc.
Okay, Rock, do you have any? I think Rock, you still
Yeah.
left, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think another angle that I've taken on this is identifying opportunities to improve internally. And having the information security program kind of lead that charge. So, for instance, as we have been expanding into OT security, right, in our plants and our pipelines, we've identified, we've been able to leverage that and pivot and start some IT/OT integration initiatives as a result of it, right? Because we've identified opportunities where, hey, hey business, did you know that you have data on diverse system A and data on diverse system B, and if you put this data together, you can make better, faster, more effective, more efficient business decisions.
Excellent point. Excellent point.
Yeah, and then we've become kind of a trusted partner in that regard. Now, maybe you could say that the information security program might be taking on more than it can chew, but we're viewed on as a partner and almost as a broker between multiple groups at that point. So that kind of keeps us in the loop for future initiatives or future questions or future, hey, we're thinking about doing, hey, information security, we're thinking about doing this. What do you think? Right? So it gives us more visibility throughout the enterprise.
So yes, cybersecurity becomes the innovation engine for the entire organization. Yes. Excellent point. And by dint of that, we automatically become valuable. So this is exactly what I teach to my university students also. So I think we have now, about 5 minutes left. I think I'm going to turn it back to our organizers and for any final thoughts or questions or anything else.
Thank you so much, Mansoor and panel. I really appreciate it. The objective of this series is to let people from around the world that are dealing with cybersecurity issues kind of hear a debate, hear the discussions, hear what some of the key thought leaders in the industry are saying and doing. And so Joanne, John, Rock, Richard, Mansoor, this has been invaluable. This is not the standard webinar where you sign on and you see some facts and figures and see a product. This is a webinar where you get to see into the minds of some really key people, and I greatly appreciate it. Most importantly, I really love the thoughts at the end. Cybersecurity needs to be innovative, stay ahead of the curve. Cybersecurity and the CISO organization needs to be involved at the beginning of business projects and processes, tied to the mission of the business, not just a tactical afterthought, and told to go do things after a business project has been started. Information security should be viewed, and cyber should be viewed as a P&L. It brings benefit to the business. It's not a cost center. That cybersecurity and information security needs to be planned into the business strategy. You need to have a strategy that you communicate throughout the organization about information security. You need to monitor and report your success, and you need to make that a part of the company's plans and cultures. And finally, Rock's point, identify opportunities to improve the business internally based upon that. Look at security in context of how do we make better business decisions? How do we be an engine of the business? How do we become a part of the business culture? Those are all really valid. They marry what we hear around the world by Fortune 500 CISOs that we're working with. We got a really good, not a question, but we got a quote from Matt, one of our attendees. And I'd like to read it to you. It says, I think that we look at data breaches often like we look at a bad car accident. But when an accident occurs, it's too late. We're stuck with cleanup and casualties. Accidents happen, but we can't help minimize what the damage really is by doing better threat modeling and risk analysis. Matt says he feels that as security professionals, we all need to get back to basics, looking at risks. What we're trying to protect should be number one. So that's the data. Who our adversaries are should be number two. And number three would be the implications if and what happens if an adversary gets hold of that information you're trying to protect. Matt says he'll borrow a page from Josh Corman, but we should use the adversary return on investment. What would they get out of this information? What's the most valuable they would get with the least effort? That marries quite well to what we're hearing from CISOs around the world that say that where information is often viewed as valuable, it's a key asset of the business. Over the last couple of years, large organizations have begun to realize that what is valuable to you when it's in your hands can be toxic if it's in somebody else's hands. So your valuable information, if it's put in the wrong hands, is used against you and it becomes toxic. Those are great thoughts. I really appreciate it from the panelists and from the audience. We had an excellent turnout today, good participation with questions from the audience. I really appreciate your attendance. You'll be able to get a full recording of this by going to the website at watchfulsoftware.com. There's other resources that we have and thoughts and best practices and tips and techniques. I encourage you to look at our website, look at the resources, the news and the events page, find out if one of our Global Thought Leadership breakfasts might be coming to your area. We did one last week in New York City, had a wonderful exchange in person by dozens of CISOs that are dealing with these kind of problems, roll up their sleeves and talk about best practices. With that, we'll bring this to a close. You will be, you should, when we sign off, you should be presented with a questionnaire. Would really appreciate it if you take 30 seconds, fill out that questionnaire, give us your thoughts. We're committed to doing these on an ongoing basis, and we want them to have big value to the community. Thank you so much. And panelists, you're wonderful. I really appreciate it. Thank you again.
Thank you for hosting us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, bye now.